My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RICO 12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I am sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to RICO 12. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you're hearing the meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to RICO12.com, RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. And if you're here live and would like to ask questions of our guests, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. It looks like two speech bubbles over each other. RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the cost of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to RICO12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal that is in the live meeting and also in the show notes. In the chat, when you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is number 71. One more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, before I introduce our guest speaker for today, I want to do a real quick thing. For some of you who may have know a little bit of the history of this podcast, you may know that it started out with a different podcast, a different title. It was called Journey Through Life. And I interviewed all sorts of people, not just addicts, just regular people, normies, as we may call them. And about 2.5 years ago, I met a woman. Her name is Brooke Ellefson, and I had a beautiful conversation with her in the Journey Through Life podcast. She is a now 5-year survivor of non-small cell lung cancer. And when I met her, I thought, and I honestly thought that it might be the last days, but she does a great work. And one of the greatest hugs I've ever been given was when I first met her. She gave me the biggest, most meaningful hug that I've ever received. Anyways, what I want to say is she is doing a fund run and a fundraiser for non-small cell lung cancer. And it's called Brave Like Brooke. If you go on Facebook and look up Brave Like Brooke, you can find information there to do that. Once again, it's nothing that I am saying, hey, go and do this, but I'm saying this is a very worthy cause. And if you have it in your heart to learn something about someone who is amazing and one of the better influences in my life, you can either go check it out on the podcast, Journey Through Life podcast. And I believe the title of it was Believe, Arms Around with Brooke Ellefson. So if you want to go look that up, you can, but go check out what she's doing. It's an amazing story. All right, now let's introduce our guest speaker today, Father Bill W., who I am grateful to call both a mentor and a friend. His topic is using imagination in the 11th step. And here's a little bit about Father Bill W. He's a retired Episcopal priest, continuously sober and active in 12-step recovery since 1972, coming up on 50 years. He has worked in the addiction treatment field most of his adult life and was the director of several nationally recognized treatment centers. For nearly 30 years now, he has researched and promoted the practice of two-way prayer through workshops, podcasts, and numerous articles and studies recently published in 2 major journals. He was awarded the Johnson Institute's Wheelock Whitney Award for advancing the understanding of faith and science in addiction recovery. Father Bill's podcasts are listed under his name, Father Bill W., and his website is titled Two-Way Prayer. Father Bill, take it away. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Justin. And it's good to be good to be back with you. It's been a while since we've connected, and I've been looking forward to this. Yeah, my name is Bill, and I am an alcoholic, and very grateful, as you said, for the gift of recovery. It's been quite a journey, and mine's getting long in the tooth here, as they say. And I was reflecting on what I should share on this podcast, and the guidance I received was share your experience. Don't make this an intellectual thing. I know that the subject is imagination, and we could take a rather clinical approach to that, and I might venture into it a little bit, but more so, I just wanted to come across from the heart with where imagination has taken me in my prayer life, and getting comfortable with using it, because I've got a very strong rational side, and giving myself over to that other side of the brain, the right brain, where I think creativity and imagination and spirituality reside, is, well, in the beginning, it was an effort. So just a couple of notes I've jotted down here. And I don't have time to do my story, but I was studying to be a Jesuit priest back in the very early 70s. And prior to that, I had been a runner. I was, of course, an alcoholic since I was like 12 or 14, is what mine started early. And I was sort of hiding in the seminary. It wasn't. And my drinking went underground there, and I was getting ready to run because I was getting in trouble again. And I was having the thought of where should I run to, and one place was Australia. Just go and stay drunk for the rest of my life and hopefully die early. And the second place was go to India and straighten up, find an ashram, and get really serious about spirituality. And it was at that point that I heard a voice in my head. And the voice said to me, Bill, you are 27. If those are your choices, there is something wrong with you. And I had, up until then, pretty much lived my life on the basis, it's part of our literature. If I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. But my interpretation was, if I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with the people around me. And I just changed those people. So I was very big on the geographical cure. It stunned me. I mean, I know where I was. I remember everything about that moment and the voice. And we're going to go a little deeper into the voice, because I didn't know what was happening to me at that point. But a part of me broke through to another part of me and spoke to me. And it was different from my ego voice. And I tell you, it grabbed my attention. What was happening, I know in retrospect, because I was living such a false life, I was starting to fall apart. We have the expression, we're cracking up. And it's actually probably a pretty good expression, because what was happening was the false self that I had put together up until that point, and it had held me for a long period of time. It was starting to crack. And as it cracked, God was able to get in. And so this voice was, to me, a divine voice, or certainly it was the part of me that is most connected to the divine, versus the ego voice that I was very, very familiar with. And so that was my got me sober, got me listening to it, and got me into recovery. And then I had a second experience after 20 years sober, wherein I had been working the program, and particularly the 11th step, in a very mechanical manner. I would read a little piece of literature, I'd say some prayers, I would drink my coffee. Early days, I would smoke my cigarette, but that one had to be taken care of. And off I would go. And at 20 years sober, I got in touch with a fellow who taught me about the Oxford group and the beginnings of Alcoholics Anonymous, what was happening back there. And it was there that I discovered that they did a form of prayer called two-way prayer. And that was not only speaking to God, which many of us perhaps do in our prayer life, but it was listening to God. And a very simple approach that they use. We have one mouth and two ears. Well, why is that? Well, because part of this relationship needs to be in listening mode. Excuse me. So I began doing it. I fumbled with it. I approached it with a little skepticism, and that I think is really what I wanted to talk about in today's visit. It's the skepticism that we bring to the process of prayer, and if one is able to acknowledge that, but then B, work oneself through it, I think you can come to an experience that engages the imagination in the prayer process. And this is what they were doing in the Oxford group. And this is what they were doing in early AA. So I thought I'd share a little bit about, kind of, I want to justify this practice of two-way prayer. And so here's a couple of references that I wanted to share with listeners. This is from Pass It On, which is AA published literature. It was a book published in 1984. Speaking of the Oxford group, and people need to know, of course, that Bill Wilson got sober in the Oxford group. Dr. Bob got sober in the Oxford group. There was no AA for the first 3 or 4 years when those two got together. There were no steps, but they were getting sober through this fellowship that was highly dependent upon prayer and meditation. And the form of prayer was two-way prayer, which involved listening for God's guidance. So with that background, this is speaking of the Oxford group. It says they were most ardent, too, in their practice of meditation and prayer. At least 1 hour a day, and 2 hours would be better. I don't know too many who do that. They felt that when people commenced to adhere to the 4 moral standards, the absolutes, honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love, when they really began practicing those, and Wilson said he put those into steps 6 and 7. When they really began practicing those, then God could enter and direct their lives. Under these conditions, every individual could receive specific guidance, which could inspire every decision and act of living, great or small. Following meditation and prayer, they practiced what they call a quiet time, asking God for specific directives. Pencil in hand, they wrote down what came into their minds. So I began doing that. I did not tell my wife I was doing that because I thought she might have me committed and she would have good cause, but not for that one, So I started writing, and then I started studying it and getting freer in listening to the voice, allowing it to express itself again through imagination. Now, if you know the history, we kind of are indebted to Carl Jung because Roland Hazard was his patient, and he was sent by Jung to go and have a spiritual experience, a psychic change, and he did that by joining the Oxford group, and then he helped Ebby, and Ebby, of course, helped Bill Wilson. So we trace ourselves, we trace our lineage back to Jung. And Jung had a practice that he developed called active imagination. And what he encouraged people to do was to engage the imagination, to allow it to speak through you. And he would encourage people to do dream work, that if you have a dream and a character appears in your dream, talk to that character. Hey, you, where are you coming from? What are you trying to tell me? You know? Now, I've never seen this exactly tied to the two-way prayer practice, but I think it's exactly what is happening. When I work with people in teaching them the two-way prayer practice, that's what I encourage them to do, to approach this using your imagination. So I've kind of reduced it down to steps 10, 11, and 12. So in 10, I watch myself. I watch myself inwardly and outwardly. Is there a disturbance? Luke Skywalker would say, is there a disturbance in the Force? Watch for it. The big books that were restless, irritable, discontent. Watch for it. One of the pioneers in AA said, if we don't watch, we won't know what the hell to pray for. Brilliant, brilliant. So I have to watch myself, watch what's going on internally and externally. And as a result of that, I see disturbances. I see that my connection with God is disturbed. It's blocked in some way, shape, or form. And I see that every day. I'm either a very good step 10 worker, or I'm just a terrible step 12 worker. I'm not sure which it is. Maybe it's a little bit of both, but I'm always able to find something that I need help with, you see, that I need help with. And so that's what I then bring to my prayer. And then what I do, and I think this is in real accord with Jung, and in the show notes, I asked Justin if he could put in a little piece on the use of imagination in prayer by St. Ignatius of Loyola. And it's just a 3-minute thing, but I'd encourage you to do that, because what the mystics were much more comfortable doing was entering into a very free-flowing relationship with God. The big book says what? That the great reality is within. The great reality is within. And where within would be my question. Where within? I don't think it's so much in my left foot or kidney. I think it's much more in my unconscious. That's where I think God resides. And the unconscious wants to become conscious, you see? And that's why dreams happen to us. That the unconscious is, I believe, and Jung certainly believed, is trying to speak to us. It's often difficult to find the an understanding, because it speaks in kind of a code, in symbols, and it takes a little work to begin understanding the symbols that are there. But it's definitely a communication. So what I've experienced personally is that by doing this Oxford group practice of two-way prayer, I am able to reach through imagination into that part of me that wants to speak to me, that wants to become conscious, that wants me to realize in my life who I am and who I could be, and push me towards that, pull me towards that. You see, and that's what I experience. Now you can go a little overboard with this, and if you try to use it to give me a number that I should play in the numbers game, that's a distortion of it, and which horse do I bet on, and those kinds of things. No. But there's an inner wisdom inside of it. I really believe this. I mean, I've taught thousands of people now how to do this process, and very quickly they are able, I find, to access this inner wisdom and allow it to speak. So I'm going to just read a couple to kind of give you a flavor for what this is. This is one that appeals to me greatly because, we talk about imagination here, and we're quite willing to imagine all sorts of terrible things that are going to happen to us. We're able to imagine all sorts of horrific things that we say to ourselves about ourselves, right? In therapy, I was asked, a therapist asked me, "Hey, Bill, if somebody said to you the things you say to you about you, what would you do to them?" And I said, "I'd kill them." And he said, "Well, good morning. What have you been doing with your alcoholism? You've been killing yourself." Oh, okay. So I started seeing the map a little clear. Anyway, here's this woman, fairly new to two-way prayer, but she had an eating disorder. And here's her question: Heavenly Father, I've been struggling with self-loathing. See, who can't identify with that? I look in the mirror and hate what I see. I feel so unattractive. At my core, I feel unlovable. Help me, Father. Boom. Step 10. Hey, see it? 11. And I encourage people to use a term of endearment to begin. My precious child, it saddens me when you are hurting so. You are loved more than you could ever know. I've watched you over these past several years go through some painful losses, especially the loss of your grandson. My sweet daughter, come to me. I am real. I am safe. Treat yourself as you would your own beloved child. Nourish your body. It is my gift to you. Speak only love to yourself. Treat others as you wish they would treat you. Do these things, and the light of my deep and endless love for you will fill you, shine through you to others. You will know self-love. You will begin to receive all the desires of your heart. Go now, I am with you. Inner wisdom, inner love, the part of myself that Jung always wrote with a capital S. See, this is the self that I need to listen to, the self that knows what I need, the self that's going to push me towards that. I believe God wants to be realized through us. And that's why there's 7 billion of us. I've lost count. It might be up to 8 now, but there's billions of us because God is infinite, and the infinite expression of that. But it has to take form in a human life, and that is what step 11 is about. Is introducing us to that inner wisdom that wants to be realized uniquely through us in finding the meaning and purpose to our lives. And if we find that, we find peace and joy, you know. And if we don't find that, if we're not in touch with that, if we're not bringing that into manifestation, then we're going to feel restless, irritable, and discontent because we're not using or being used as we need and ought to be. Couple of things I did want to share. I'm watching my clock, but on the use of imagination in prayer. This is from the 12 steps and 12 traditions. Listen, it says there's nothing the matter with constructive imagination. All sound achievement rests upon it. Well, meditation is like that too. It helps to envision our spiritual objective before we try to move towards it. All right. And now I just want to read a few passages from the Big Book and see if they don't start to take on a different meaning, understanding, once we know this background. They certainly did for me, you know. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, the spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. Say, direction, provided we took other simple steps. We drew near to him. He disclosed himself to us. All right. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. On awakening, we all know this one, huh? Let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. When agitated, hey, you know, we ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision. We don't struggle. On and on it goes, and so what the two-way prayer is opening for people is this sense of intimacy, a sense of intimacy with the Creator. And the Creator, I believe, has a need for that intimacy, a desire for it, all right? It's not that just God is sitting out there and you guys do what you want. I think God is striving himself or herself to seek realization through us. That's why nobody's wasted. But the important thing, the vital thing, is for alcoholics and addicts to find a greater sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. See? The Oxford Group people believe that God had a plan for each and every individual. Well, you need to find out what that plan is for you, you know? And then you need to begin all you can do to realize that plan. All you can do in step 6 and 7 to keep away the things that are keeping you from fulfilling that plan. I think I'm just going to read one piece of guidance and then I'll quit. But this is from last week, and this is my own. I always read other people's, but time for me to venture out here. And I keep coming back to this question, asking for guidance in my life in kind of a general way. Lord, who would you have me be, and what would you have me do? So what I hear, this was Holy Spirit. Sometimes I listen to Jesus. Sometimes I listen to Father. I've been known to tune into Mother God on occasion too. So I'm all over the place. Spirit, child of our own creation, We would have you know, KNOW, know us, dialogue with us. Allow us to come into this world through you. This is our desire above all things. And this is your reason for being. Please, please, please meditate deeply on this, for it contains so much more than you give it at first glance. This holds the riddle of why love seems so elusive. If you cling to you and we cling to us, only conflict and suffering can prevail. But if we pour out our being into you and you do the same, then separation is ended and wholeness is affirmed. Love is a two-way street. We are prepared to do our part. Now we ask, are you prepared to do yours? That's all I got.
Father Bill, I so appreciate it, and I love the that you were willing to share a little bit of your own guidance and going into kind of what I've experienced in two-way prayer meetings with you, the pleading from the Holy Spirit there. Please, please get to know us. I mean, that's and this is coming to, and I don't want to, pump you up here, but coming to somebody who daily for decades has been practicing this and still, please, please get to know us better, love, and that really opened my eyes and heart to that guidance. Thank you for sharing that. I think that was a bit of a three-way prayer moment for me.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, very good. So now we're going to jump into the Q&A portion of this meeting. For those of you here in the live audience, and we've got lots of you, grateful for your attendance today. If you have a question for Father Bill W., please type it in the Q&A link there at the bottom of the Zoom window. I'm going to start us off with a question that I hear very often from my own sponsees when I ask them about their relationship with God and how they hear God, and also from others who ask questions about prayer in particular. Father Bill, how do I know when the voice I hear is my own or if it's God? How do I tell the difference there?
Well, what the Oxford Group people would recommend is you first put it through a series of tests. And I don't do this for everything. I didn't need to test the reading that I did. I felt no need to test that. Is that me or is that God? If it's me, long time ago, I decided it's the best part of me, and it's the part of me that I need to listen to. So, there's definitely at least two parts, and one is the ego voice, and one is the inner self, the great reality within, the God self. And it needs to pass the test. Is that voice, is what came through honest? Is it pure? Is it unselfish? Is it loving? If it doesn't pass that test, throw it away. It cannot possibly be from God, because that is who God is, according to the Oxford groups. They like to keep it simple, and so they kind of reduced it down to four things. Easier to keep track of four than 24. So that's the first test. If it's some serious piece of guidance, then they recommended that you definitely review it with someone else who is listening to God. So if I were to get guidance to move to Chicago, I would not start packing my bags. I would call you, Justin, and say, hey, Justin, this is what I heard this morning. And you might say something, well, Bill, keep listening. There's a lot to keep you there in Austin, and every little thought that comes into your mind certainly is not going to be coming from God. So sorting them out is important, and but they were practical and intelligent people, and they had a good process for doing that. I haven't seen it a real problem.
Thank you so much. All right, we have a question that came in from the live audience. Blue asks, or says initially, thank you. Now, how should I pray to move through grief and receive healing? Are there specific questions I should be asking God in that instance?
Well, what I would encourage people to do is ask the most honest question. which may be, God, I feel like you left me. I feel like you're hurting me. Because maybe at a deep level, I am feeling that. But a part of me says, oh, you shouldn't feel that. But I am. So my advice is bring what is real. What is real and troubling you on your heart. Bring that. God, I don't believe you're there. Please help me. If you are, if you are. But that's the honesty. And I think the more honest the question, read the book of Job. You want to talk about pain and suffering and all of that sort of stuff. Well, it's part of our wisdom literature and tradition, because that's part of the human condition. And there's a lovely line in there. It's a little bit of a different translation, but I love this one. Though you slay me, yet will I put my trust in you. So the experience of the ego always experiences, Jung says, an encounter with the divine as a defeat. A defeat. You see? So if I have a defeat in my life, these are the things that I really need to bring into my prayers. The successes are nice, but probably not going to learn very much through them. The defeats, the pains, the sufferings. Oh, that's rich material. And it's the human condition. We do suffer.
Thank you so much. I think one of the more powerful two-way prayer experiences for myself was when I was just angry at God. And I let him know. I let him know it. And that was amazing. And one of the most powerful ones that I've ever heard, like in a two-way prayer group, was full of so much colorful language, anger, malice at God. And then the answer coming back was just beautiful. And I think what you said there, share the human experience and be real about it. God's not going to, if I call him a dirty SOB, he's not going to stop loving me. Right. In fact, my experience is that he puts his arm around me that much tighter. So
think of a 2-year-old or a 3 or 4-year-old who yells at their parents. Does that make you stop loving them? No. No.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Father Bill, can you please go a little bit deeper into the 4 absolutes that you mentioned, the honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love, and just kind of talk a little bit about why those were so important to the Oxford group and why they may be so important to us today as we seek the will of God in our lives?
Well, the Oxford group people, Frank Bookman, who was the founder, took things. He was very practical. If he liked something and it was effective, he took it. So he took the practice of guidance that I talked about in the 11th step. He took the 4 absolutes from someone and put them into his program. He took them from a Presbyterian minister by the name of Robert Spear, who published a book called The Principles of Jesus. And in that book, I think came out in 1902, he reduced the personality of Jesus down to he was absolutely honest, absolutely pure, unselfish, absolutely loving. And as I said earlier, I think Wilson put these into steps 6 and 7. Well, that was a mind blower for me because that opened those steps up, and they shouldn't contradict one another either. If I'm going to have a conversation with someone, it needs to be honest and it needs to be loving at the same time. Sometimes I think, if I say this, it's going to be hurtful. Well, then don't say it, because it needs to be honest and it needs to be loving. And if I'm listening to guidance, I'm going to find a way through guidance to do exactly that, to come from the heart, to speak the truth, but to do it in a manner that's loving and compassionate. very helpful to understand those and practice them. And Dr. Bob practiced them, he said, throughout his life, found them helpful. Bill, not so much. He worried that alcoholics would be scared by, his expression was, trying to get good by Thursday. You know, it's like too much for these poor drunks. Well, I don't think it is. I think Bob was more on the right track.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any favorite resources or books on the practice of active imagination or two-way prayer that
Yes,
that you'd like to share with us?
There's a book called Inner Work by Robert Johnson that is helpful. It's not so much listening to the God voice. All right. I haven't found a really good book specifically on that. Some books come close. But that one is a very helpful for understanding the practice. On the Two-Way Prayer website, under resources, go to books, and you'll find a number of books listed there that were popular in the Oxford group and read by early AAs. So,
thank you very much. All right, reminder to our live audience, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A there at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those. All right, Father Bill, what can you share with us maybe an experience in your own life in practicing two-way prayer where something seemingly insignificant that you got turned into something very meaningful?
Well, yeah, the classic for me is this was many years ago. My kids were young, still at home, and my wife had taken them to Dallas to visit her sister, and I was left by myself, and you know, the guidance or the instructions from the Oxford group were write down the thoughts that come, even if it's a stray thought or a crazy thought. Try to capture it and write it down. So I'm doing my listening to God and all this good stuff, and a thought comes into my head: go plant a tree. And I wrote it down, and I felt the struggle in writing it down. Well, that's a crazy thought. Let that sucker go. And when I went back, and I always read what my guidance was after I'm finished a short session, they're 5 or 7 minutes, and I read what was there. And this one just jumped out at me: go plant a tree. And the immediate thought was, well, I'd feel stupid following that guidance. And then the next thought was, well, it's good for you to feel stupid because you like to think you're smart, you know? So I was like, oh my God, there might be something more to this than first appears. And so, feeling stupid, I got dressed and went to the nursery and bought a tree on sale. It didn't say I had to spend a fortune. Came back feeling stupid, but now feeling obedient. You see, he said, "What, you know, am I benefiting from it?" Yeah, now feeling obedient and stupid, and going into the middle of the backyard and planting that little puppy, you know. And then for 15 years, whatever it was, before we moved, I never looked at that tree once. Never once looked at it without thinking of God. It was my obedience tree. It was my God tree, right in the center of the garden. I was back in Eden for just a temporary visit, anyway. When I could tune into that. So there's a classic example from my life of doing something that looked very silly, and yet turned out to be one of the most profound things I've ever done. You never know.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Father Bill. All right, we got a couple more questions that came in from our live audience before we wrap up. First one is from Sophie. Sophie asks, could you please speak more about how to know if something is pure? I think that's a really good question, actually.
I'm indebted to some friends in All Addicts Anonymous who kind of broke down the four absolutes, and purity purity is always the one that I get questions on. You know, well, wouldn't you know? Honesty, who can be against that? Unselfishness, well, of course. Love, yes, great thing. Purity, where the hell are you poking yourself now? Get out of my sex life. Well, it was more than just sex. It's not the best word, I guess, for today's mind, because we all react like that. But they broke it down differently. And that was very helpful to me. Purity of heart, purity of the emotions, purity of mind. All right? Sexual purity. It really has to do with anything that's contaminating me and my relationship with God, or contaminating me and my relationship with other people. What's getting in the way? What's getting in the way? So it's impurity. Old ivory soap, I don't even know if it's still around, but 99, 44, 100% pure. But there's always some impurity. Well, if you can look for the impurities, you can find out where you need to grow and where you need to change, or what you need to surrender more. It doesn't mean that I can't have an exciting life. My God, I think God wants us to have an exciting life, including sexually. So let's, we got to get over some of those hangups that we bring. And what's keeping me from joy? What's keeping me from peace? What is it? That's the purity.
Thank you so much for sharing that and clarifying it to me. All right, another question from Therese. Therese asks, I sometimes get stuck on what question to ask God. Any suggestions there?
Well, Dr. Bob frequently just kind of looked at his day ahead and took his instructions and went about his father's business, was one of the quotes. Here's quoting to Paul S. and Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Bob's morning devotion consisted of a short prayer, a 20-minute study of a familiar verse from the Bible, and a quiet period of waiting for directions as to where he that day should find use for his talents. Having heard, he would rigorously go about his father's business, as he put it. So if nothing else, and it's rare that I only do this, I also do this looking at the day ahead. But if there is not a great problem, or I'm not just in the mood, sometimes we're just not in the mood for this thing, and that's quite okay. But I will sit, I will read, and I will look at my day ahead and write down the guidance. And then do I act upon that guidance? But as you get better at taking your inventory, at watching yourself, I think over time you become more sensitive to the impurities, to go back to that word, that are hampering me, you see? So I'm usually able to find something. Or I have a problem coming up, or I need guidance on something. I bring my decision making. Nothing's too big, nothing's too small to bring to this process.
Thank you very much. And I also, when I have that thought of what do I ask for today, I go right to step 11 and what it reads, asking for, I'm going to read it directly here, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Hey, what's your will for me today?
Right.
What do I need to have in order to do that? Yeah, very good. All right, one more question has come in, and then we'll start the wrap up here in a couple of minutes. But the question is from Zach. Zach asks, I want to get better at the practice of two-way prayer and actually following the guidance I receive. How do I effectively deal with resistance toward the spiritual instinct? And could you talk about the process involved in order to become willing to do two-way prayer consistently and to do actions that I receive from two-way prayer?
Ooh, break that one down, Justin. And is this my buddy Zach out in Washington State?
I don't. I
don't
think I
know.
recognize who this Zach is, and I don't think he lives in
Oh,
Washington
okay.
State. This is a different Zach.
Zach, who helped us out on the two-way prayer website, and just a beautiful, beautiful guy. So give me the question.
The first question is, how do I effectively deal with the resistance toward the spiritual instinct? And then the next question, go
to
ahead.
Doing the two-way prayer,
yes,
yeah, and to surrendering. Well, welcome to meeting your ego. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this thing is to meet yourself, and you're meeting two selves. St. Francis says it's like the inner wolf, and which one do you feed? Do you feed this wolf? Do you give in to your lesser instincts and desires and things of that nature, or do you follow the guidance that you've received? And it may be the smallest thing, but great rewards are going to come from that. So, yeah, oh my gosh, we are a divided self, and you're going to meet yourself every day. That's why I have no trouble finding things to pray about, because I'm meeting myself, and I'm not always liking who I'm seeing there. But I got to own it. I have to take ownership of it, not push it down. So much of religious training pushes stuff down. Well, you push it down, it's like a beach ball, a beach ball, push it under the water, it's going to pop up somewhere. So yeah, you need to meet it and engage with it and work with it, So there's part one of the question. It was a three-parter. Go ahead.
All right. The next part was talking about the process involved in order to become willing to do two-way prayer consistently. And the third part is to act on what I receive from two-way prayer.
Yeah. So the willingness to do it. Well, oftentimes I will look at my guidance from the day before. Now, when I sit down like this morning to do a piece of work, I read what I wrote yesterday. And I look at it. Was I asked to do certain things? And did I do them? And sometimes the answer is no. I did not do them. Well, think about that for a second. Here I am meeting the creator of the universe who asked me to call Charlie, and I, in my egotism, blow it off. Well, I don't know why I was supposed to call Charlie, but I was asked to do it, and I wasn't obedient. So, I mean, what the Oxford Group people said, if you keep getting those over and over again, well, you can expect the voice to dry up. But if you're living it, if you're really trying to do God's will, and God's will for me yesterday was call Charlie, but my ego steps in and says, not important. So, yeah, I mean, this process opens me up to seeing just how in control my ego side is versus my surrendered and aligned side that's praying only for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. And I think the last part of the question was I think, in regard to the power, perhaps, but that I don't have the power to do some of these things. But God supplies that power. You see, God supplies that power. We're never asked to do anything to which the power will not be supplied. So it's there. And I've seen people do all sorts of things once they've aligned themselves with this power, and then you become a real transformer for other people in life. You don't get worn out. Not if you're. This is 100,000 watts of electricity that you're plugging into, you know, uh, you know, this is going to take your little Tesla all across the country. All right. It ain't just 300 miles. Boom. It's all the way, and you don't even need an extension cord. It's just boom, you got it. So you start to feel this energy, and God is energy. I think God is much more of a verb. It's not original with me, more of a verb than a noun. We think of a noun, we want to control it, put it somewhere. Verb is happening to us. Well, God's happening to us, or God's not happening to us. Which is it? God's everything or God's nothing? What was our choice to be? This brings it alive. I deal a lot with young people, and sometimes young people will say, in treatment, oh, you want me to go to AA? Oh, it's so boring. And I listen to them. Yes, it is boring. We've made it boring. We've made it boring. And we need to bring it to life. And if we don't bring it to life, it's going to die. And I say, let it die. That was Bill Wilson's, if a group got sick, this was the understanding. They believed in the early days, if it wasn't filled with spirituality and energy and aliveness, it was going to die. And his response was, let it. It has lost its power to connect people to God. And that's what it's all about. And the addict really needs this if he or she is gonna survive. So there's an inducement there, well beyond the normal people. See, other people rust out, we flame out. A great big Roman candle in the sky when another addict bits the dust,
Oh, Father Bill, I love that. And I love that call to, well, to me, it was a call to action. If I belong to, and I want to extend this invitation to others, if I belong to a fellowship, a meeting, a group that is dying, I either need to try to inject God into that group to bring it back, or let it die and go find a group that God is in. What a beautiful invitation and challenge.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a fantastic meeting for all addicts and for those wanting to learn more about addiction. Father Bill, let's get ready to close this out. But before we do that, I want to invite everybody to come back. Next week, we'll be hearing from guest speaker Lydia G. And I'm excited to hear from her. And we've got a lot of guest speakers lined up for the next couple of months. We're starting to book into the beginning of 2022 right now, which is really, really cool. All right. Father Bill, before we head out, you would like to launch us off into the rest of our day with this reading of Psalm 23.
Yeah, this was sent to me this week. I'm sure it's been around for many years, but it was new to me and brought new life into it. It's actually a Christian friend of mine named June who lives in Tel Aviv. She sent it. So the 23rd Psalm. With commentary, we would say, the Lord is my shepherd. That's relationship. I shall not want. That's supply. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. That's rest. He leadeth me beside the still waters. That's refreshment. He restoreth my soul. That's healing. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness. That's guidance. For his name's sake, that's purpose. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that's testing. I will fear no evil. That's protection. For thou art with me. That's faithfulness. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. That's discipline. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. That's hope. Thou anointest my head with oil. That's consecration. My cup runneth over. That's abundance. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. That's blessing. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord. That's security forever. That's eternity. Amen.
Amen. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.